Avery, whose show is this? And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge Podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, Senior Lakers Insider, as well as lead Lakers content creator for Offside, joined on this fine. It's really not that. I mean, it's beautiful outside right now where I am, but mostly frustrated, kind of an annoying Thursday afternoon by you guys. I am going to, on this show, talk about the LaMelo Ball trade that went down this morning after that being reported right at the tail end of the second round of the draft last night. I will talk about that second round of the draft in which the Lakers bought a pick, tried to move up further in the draft, like somebody that they were going to take, didn't get that guy, and then sold back out of the draft. And then I will also talk about the I'm sorry. As I'm introing the show. Um RoboCop pops in. I think Rob is waiting in line for Space Mountain. It's a long line. It can get long. Sometimes it's a bit of a respite from that hot summer sun there in Disneyland. So I kind of get it. But yeah, so we will go ahead and talk about that second round, which didn't break in the Lakers' favor. Also not breaking in the Lakers' favor is their attempts to land the A-list center that Luka Doncic has made it crystal clear he wants. By way of that LaMelo Ball trade, couple options left the board there as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Jen is calling me right now. She just got off of work, so whoops. Sorry, babe. I thought I was going way earlier. And then pause. And then we will go ahead and answer whatever questions you guys have over the course of the show. A quick reminder before we dive on in, please hit that like button. Please hit that share button. Please subscribe here to the channel. If you guys are listening to the show in the morning via podcast, please subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcast, preferably on Odyssey, but they all are perfectly fine with me. And then if you guys are watching here on YouTube, it is brought to you in part in this YouTube form by Prize Picks. Use that promo code HMA and make a $5 lineup of your own when you sign up, and you will get $50 worth of free lineups on Prize Picks. So, yes, the Lakers aren't playing, but you still have baseball, you still have the World Cup, you still have plenty of things that you can make a little bit exciting there using a little bit more exciting using Prize Picks. All right, let's go ahead and dive on in, starting with this LaMelo Ball trade, which can't lie, was a bit of a kick in the nuts to the Lakers. From a sheer basketball standpoint, this trade is absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. The Minnesota Timberwolves the last few years have been this big, bruising, physical team that, like, no matter what combination of players were on the court, they were going to beat you into submission, beat you into oblivion, and you were not going to enjoy playing against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And it's why, frankly, that playing style, that identity, I think really helped them advance to the, you know, deeper into the playoffs, right? Two straight Western Conference Finals there, and before this last one, they swept right through the Lakers a couple of years ago. And like I thought they presented an interesting dynamic for Wemby as he grows into his game. I thought they presented a tough matchup for like the Denver Nuggets, right? But by way of trading away Julius Randle as they did earlier this year in a salary dump, and then by trading Naz Reid and turning him and a couple of picks, some pick swaps and stuff like that, into as well as they sent Charlotte sent LaMelo Ball and Josh Green. like by moving Julius Randle and Naz Reid, now all of a sudden the front court is thin, right? Now the only front court player that they have that you could definitely write in Sharpie in their starting lineup next year is Rudy Gobert. And then from there, it's really kind of interesting. Are they going to go small and have Jaden McDaniels start at the 4 with Dosunmu moving into the starting lineup, who they obviously re-signed earlier this week, going with a starting lineup of Dosunmu, obviously Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, Jaden McDaniels, and Rudy Gobert. Like, that's an interesting lineup. It's a really fun one, but that is no longer that hyper physical team that had given the Lakers problems and really in the playoffs given a lot of teams problems. So I don't think they're done. I think they're going to be looking to bring in their starting power forward between now and the beginning of next year, and we'll see to what extent they are successful there. Chris Connolly is always very aggressive, according to the reports coming out of there in Minnesota. The word is that the Timberwolves and their new ownership are willing to spend into the luxury tax. So we'll see what that roster winds up looking like, but it is absolutely fascinating what that team is going to look like. Like, it's funny because on one hand, that physicality, created a lot of issues for a lot of these teams, but it also led to a situation where if Anthony Edwards was double teamed, there just wasn't many options for the Timberwolves to get their offense started or get positive momentum going in their offense, and it often became really kind of stagnant. Now that you have LaMelo Ball, it's going to be really difficult to double team either he or Anthony Edwards without giving up a really big advantage there. You also have two elite off the dribble 3-point shooters who are really going to space the floor. Rudy Gobert as a lob threat with that much space is going to be really interesting. And I think they have enough length and athleticism to be okay defensively. And worst comes to worst, they can just funnel everybody into the paint where Rudy Gobert will be waiting. Decent chance, by the way, he rejoins in a more serious fashion the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. So for the Timberwolves and for the Western Conference, it's this big kind of gamble, and I'm truly fascinated by how this is going to play out for them. Starting obviously with how they fill out the rest of the roster, but then by what kind of basketball Minnesota plays next year. If this gamble doesn't pay off, and Minnesota takes a step back by way of LaMelo Ball's injury issues, he's always in and out of the lineup. If he and Anthony Edwards aren't mature enough to lead a locker room, that's going to be interesting to see. If there isn't enough defense or physicality now that they've let Naz Reid and Julius Randle go without resupplementing that front court, there are several ways that I could see this playing out poorly. There's also a few ways where I could see this playing out really well for Minnesota, and they become like a weirder, tougher matchup for some teams. So that's in a basketball sense in the Western Conference, how I think that's going to affect the Lakers. Charlotte, really kind of interesting what they're doing. They re-signed Kobe White basically shortly after they announced or I guess reported that the trade was going down here. And now you have, he's like their lead ball handler. Now, LaMelo Ball had a really positive impact on their offense. And I know that there are those maturity issues and injury questions about LaMelo Ball. But they are going to have to, find a way to replace his production. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do that. Naz Reid is really, makes for a really interesting set of circumstances there for the rest of that roster there, and that you already have Con Knipple, who is was the best or I think knocked down the most 3-pointers in the league last year. You have Kobe White, who can space the floor. You have obvious Naz Reid spaces the floor really well. And then, they have the, shooting with, on the wings, and we'll see what they wind up doing with some of those wings if they elect to keep all of them. But yeah, that's an interesting team there in Charlotte. Doesn't really impact the Lakers because I don't think the Lakers ever would have to plan on seeing the Charlotte Hornets in a final series. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens here with Minnesota. Now let's take a second and talk about what this does for the Lakers' options at center, which so it's been funny because every Laker fan exited that season last year and probably said to themselves, need to get better at the center position, right? And that's 2 years straight of saying that. Now, they did get better from 2 seasons ago to last year when they added DeAndre Ayton, but that wasn't better enough. And it was better in the sense of like, it was a good addition given that the Lakers weren't looking to use draft capital to or a big, to acquire a starting caliber center last year because they wanted to keep all of their powder dry for this year. Now you fast forward to now, and every Laker fan who watched that team last year, including Luka Doncic, right? Like, walked away from last year, said, all right, Ayton, you outperformed your contract. You were perfectly fine for a DeAndre Ayton season, but that isn't enough, right? And there have been centers who I think all of whom that I'm going to bring up would be upgrades over Ayton. And you can disagree with me if you want. You can disagree with me to the extent, or we could have that debate if you want. But in my opinion, all of these centers who have been moved so far this year would be upgrades over Ayton. Even if they're, acquiring them would be somewhat complicated. So let's start with the first, the first center who moved so far this year, that being Nick Claxton. And he went from the Brooklyn Nets in a 3-team trade to the Chicago Bulls, who basically acquired him for cap space. That was it, right? And I know that Lakers fans are going to say, well, he's really skinny and his game was heading in the wrong direction. And there are plenty of reasons to be skeptical of, Nick Claxton, the basketball player. I think he has a very workable contract that is descending in value, which made him even more appealing to me. I think he would be a lot better in a situation with Luka and Austin, and I'm told likely LeBron James, who I believe is going to be back next year. So, I think with that amount of creation, I think Nick Claxton would have taken a step back in the direction that into the player that he was a couple of years ago. I do think that the questions about his frame are fair, right? I think in this West you need more of a bruising anchor, which he is not. He does not shoot 3-pointers, and his rebounding is going in the wrong direction. There are plenty of reasons to say I'm not really sure about this guy. Now, also worth noting, had the Lakers acquired him into their cap space, that would have involved, because LeBron hasn't been signed yet, because Rui hasn't been signed yet, that would have meant you needed to renounce both of those guys to bring in Nick Claxton into the cap space created by renouncing them, which complicates things, right? Because now you have to acquire Nick Claxton into that cap space, and now you don't have bird rights on either LeBron or Rui Hachimura anymore. And you would have to go and ask one of them, likely, are you willing to play at the mid-level exception or sign into the remaining cap space that we have after trading for Claxton now, which, may have been a complicating factor at that point. Are you willing to risk losing Rui Hachimura and or LeBron James for Nick Claxton? Perfectly fine if you don't think so. I think that there would have been ways to have those conversations so that you could have brought one or both of those guys back. But regardless, Claxton off of the table. The next guy who winds up getting moved is Isaiah Stewart, right? Who went again from Detroit, got traded basically into cap space for 3 second rounders. Those 3 second rounders were the ones I believe that Memphis had acquired earlier by trading out of the first round. And so like they basically utilized their flexibility to bring in Isaiah Stewart. You guys have heard me argue on behalf of Isaiah Stewart previously. That is somebody I had reported and still continue to hear right until he was eventually traded, that the Lakers had shown an interest for, but it doesn't wind up happening. And again, you want to say, well, Ayton is bigger, Ayton is this, Ayton is that. I love Isaiah Stewart's motor. I love how fast he is. I think he would have provided a really interesting dynamic at the center position, whether that be as I think he probably, had they acquired him, he probably would have been a backup on top of whatever other center that they go out and get. But you go out and you get him. He is he's a super underrated rim protector. He has really long arms, really thick body. He basically can't be moved because his center of gravity is like underground. And so it just makes it, for this really challenging thing to score on him one way or another. And on top of it, every team that plays against him has to be worried at any given moment that he might haul off and beat the shit out of one of their players, which I kind of like in one of my front court players. Like, I like having kind of a loose cannon there who the other team is just a little nervous around at all times, especially a team that has Luka Doncic and LeBron James and Austin Reeves, three guys who will get their share of cheap shots from time to time from the other team. If they get a cheap shot and Isaiah Stewart doesn't like that cheap shot, probably a good chance that Isaiah Stewart is going to make it so that nobody wants to throw that cheap shot ever again, which I think is really kind of valuable. But anyway, he is no longer on the table because he got traded to Memphis. In order to acquire him, you would have only needed to, I believe, renounce one of LeBron or Rui. So you probably could have just renounced Rui there, traded for Isaiah Stewart, still had bird rights on LeBron, and carried out the rest of your offseason. For the most part, whenever I hear people talk about Rui's market, if he was to leave the Lakers, it's in that like mid-level range. By the way, sorry, I have my phone over here just in case something happens while I'm on the air. But yeah, like if Rui does leave, most of the people who have been kind of figuring out what his market would be have him pegged at or around, maybe slightly higher than, if a team really, really likes him, the mid-level exception, which means that the Lakers, at least theoretically, could have brought him back depending on what his market is and depending on if he doesn't hold it against them for wanting him back after a successful season, without, while taking a pay cut. So yeah, I like the Stewart thing, no longer an option. Claxton, no longer an option. And now by way of this LaMelo Ball trade, two fewer options out there, right? Like you have, Gobert was somebody who, yes, like Luka clearly doesn't like and really enjoys attacking whenever his teams face off against Gobert teams. And yet, like, had the market shaken out differently and Gobert would have been available, probably the best defensive anchor that you could possibly have realistically have acquired this year. He is absolutely huge, which makes it so that you can he can at least in theory be a lob target. Now, he has terrible hands and he is one of the worst finishers I have ever seen. which would have made him very frustrating in that regard. And he also is on a huge contract, and because of the amount of picks that it took to land him, his trade cost probably would have been pretty high. So, like, if you want to say, well, he's not a perfect uh, acquisition, then all right, fine. Um, Also, obviously, who was available and nothing but a salary dump was Julius Randle, who was not a center. So I'm not really going to consider him one of the guys that I'm like, even remotely bummed that he is gone and the Lakers didn't bring him back. The other guy here, though, who I do think would have been interesting was Naz Reid, where now in order to move off of Naz Reid, the Timberwolves brought in a max level point guard, who they think is going to keep Anthony Edwards a little happier than than had they not brought LaMelo in. So like the price on Naz Reid was probably pretty high. But like if you're getting a good player, the price is probably going to be pretty high. We'll talk about prices on potential other guys here in a bit. But Naz Reid, he's this really big body. He can space the floor, which means you could play some five out. He could shoot the ball over the top of Wembenyama, which I think is something that every team that is hoping to beat Wemby in a series is going to be have to be able to do. And he was this interesting option who I had thought maybe, just maybe, and now he's off of the board. Now that he is in Charlotte, so those are two other options, which leaves basically it's like Walker Kessler, who I've been told is extremely unlikely. You have Jalen Duren, who is also extremely unlikely, based on the stuff that I've heard. You have your free agents, right? Robert Williams or Mitchell Robinson. There's been a lot of noise coming out of New York that they are like preparing for losing Mitchell Robinson to the Lakers. Because they don't want to go above the second apron, and the Lakers, I guess, according to the word coming out of New York, is that the Lakers are prepping some offer in the range of the mid-level exception, or maybe a full $15 million an offer, which includes a promise to start, which is something he hasn't been doing, obviously, there in New York, with Karl Anthony Towns starting ahead of him. So like Mitchell Robinson is an interesting one, but he's also not perfect, right? I guess we could have the return of the Haka whatever strategy, to the hallways where it started. You could go from Haka Shaq to Haka Mitch. So you have that. I guess you could he is kind of a lob, he's a lob threat in that he can get well above the rim, but he doesn't have the best hands and um not the best touch from what I've seen. Now he is a very good defensive minded big. He does get after it on the boards on both sides of the ball. So that is something that would be an additive to the Lakers, but he's not an A-list center. Even if the Lakers would try to frame it as like, oh, reigning champion, played a key role on a championship level team. So did Timothy Mozgov, by the way. And so like that would, I don't know, he would be free in that, you could sign him using your exception, I guess, after you bring back LeBron. And I guess in this instance, you could bring back Rui. It might cost you Marcus Smart if he opts out in this scenario, which I would be pretty bummed about. The Lakers would be kind of screwed defensively on the perimeter if they just lost Marcus Smart. But like as far as their other options, like there just aren't very many of them, right? Unless you're convinced that Sam Presti for some reason is going to help the Lakers get the center that they clearly and desperately need. You could, hope that DeAndre Ayton opts in, or you could have him opt out and then bring him back. But he's not an A-list center, because if he was, Luka wouldn't be asking for an A-list center. So like the options here for centers is just not great. And like we're going to take another break here in a second, but like this is something that a front office with real foresight should have seen coming. This notion that, cap space in a post cap space world, in this apron world filled with, extensions and trades and all of this stuff, like this is a scenario that the Lakers, by putting all of their eggs in the basket of cap space and the flexibility, or I guess, sorry, optionality that comes with cap space, by leading too heavily into that, the Lakers are now stuck here in a spot where, like, sure, you have optionality, but all the best options are just keeping your roster together, a roster that Luka Doncic clearly doesn't think was good enough. So let's talk about optionality. Let's talk about that cap space plan. Let's talk about some of its shortcomings as we've seen them so far. Granting, by the way, while we are having this conversation, that maybe, just maybe, I should have said, sorry, Thang, you're right. I'll go back up here and show your comment. Sorry, my texts are going nuts. Thang 5681 writes, Gafford is like 6'9", 6'8", not big enough defending Jokic or Wemby. Yeah, so like Gafford, I guess I should have presented this, would you rather, that I presented to Pete and Jovan in our little Great Western Forum group text. But like, would you rather try to trade Vando and a first, or like whatever it would have to be, Vando and Dalton and a first, for Gafford, who, by the way, has his own injury issues? Like, he is somebody who I think Luka probably holds in high regard for, having gotten to a championship series with him before. But like, in a vacuum, just outright, is Gafford A-list center? So would you rather do that to get Gafford, or just, clear whatever space you have to in order to sign Mitchell Robinson outright, especially knowing that if you do that, you risk losing Marcus Smart as well? I think I'd rather do Gafford by quite a bit, but I also, like, given how quickly I say, yeah, give me Gafford, makes me wonder if like the price on him would be that much higher. You also, like, we did see last night the Lakers and Mavericks trade a couple of times, which maybe that line of communication is now reopened. But like, do you think that organization, like, yes, Nico Harrison is out of there. Yes, Masai Ujiri is in there, but does ownership really want to trade with the team that basically forced them to fire Nico Harrison and bring in Masai Ujiri? I guess technically the Lakers, by trading for Luka Doncic, also kind of sort of force them to fire Jason Kidd too. Do the Mavericks really want to help the Lakers out there? I don't know. But yeah, like, I would rather trade for Gafford, but that involves another team who you have to convince to make that trade with, and I don't know that they actually would. Let's see. So the next one here, we have the next thing, and the final thing that I wanted to talk about, though, is this notion of optionality by way of cap space. And if this summer continues on the way that it has gone so far, I think the overwhelming message that the Lakers have to take from this, aside from firing Pelinka, but the overwhelming message that the Lakers would have to take from this is that optionality, flexibility, those concepts are no longer attached to cap space in the way that they were years ago, a full CBA ago. I think the way that you arrive at optionality and flexibility is by employing the highest number of good basketball players that you could possibly employ. Look at what Oklahoma City is capable of doing at any given moment, right? Like, it's up to them. Like, Sam Presti right now is basically sitting in his office wondering to himself, do I want to trade Isaiah Hartenstein for 1 or 2 first rounders? You know, like when was the last time the Lakers had to ask themselves that question? Does it really make sense for me to trade Dalton Connect to El Pollo Loco for a half-eaten drumstick? No, probably just keep them. You know, like the way that you arrive at the kind of flexibility, look at all the trades that are going down right now, right? How many of them feature 2 teams sending good players to one another, hoping that those good players fit better in your system than they did the previous ones that you just traded away? It requires drafting well and developing those players, and it requires not letting players just walk for nothing for the sake of this optionality that has done exactly nothing so far for the Lakers, right? Other than giving them the option to run last year's team back. So, like, to me, if I were to, run some kind of an autopsy on this offseason, let alone on the several transaction windows that the Lakers punted to arrive here with what they considered the most optionality that they could possibly have, to me, the lesson is you guys screwed up with your definition of optionality. Like, in order to have optionality, you need a bunch of good players who teams would either trade draft assets for or would consider instead of receiving draft assets for that player. And that's something that the Lakers just haven't had as an option in forever, right? Like how many players have we seen the Lakers trade away and get draft assets for? It's been years really since we saw them do that. And part of that is that, they have tried to keep as many of the good players that they have, but also part of it is they keep them until the exact moment that they are no longer worth any more draft assets, and then they lose them for nothing. So, yeah, like this is like if this offseason continues like this and the Lakers basically run last year's team back with the addition of a Mitchell Robinson and praying to God that you're still able to keep Marcus Smart in this scenario. I just cannot fathom that would be good enough for Mark Walter and for Jeannie Buss, with the possibility of Luka Doncic in his camp, like putting into place the steps that stars start taking before they depart a city or a market or a team. I just can't imagine that this offseason so far, just from a basketball standpoint, has been good enough. Let's not, like, that's not even counting the fact that we were told going into this offseason that the Lakers would completely revitalize their organization and their basketball operations department with an assistant GM and a fully fledged out analytics department and video department and all these other scouting departments and stuff like that. You saw their draft room the other night, when they were getting ready to make a draft pick, and it was like Rob and JJ and Kurt Rambis and their newly hired an analyst, and they had like a couple other people in there. It was like 7 people. Whereas you look around the league and these draft teams or these draft rooms are filled with 20, 30 people who are all there with the sole purpose of helping that organization put together the best possible roster that they could. That was part of the promise this summer, was not just that the roster was going to be completely revitalized, but that the Lakers were going to be completely revitalized, and they have not. So it's either got to pick way the hell up with moves that I just don't quite see right now, or, we're going to start counting down the days before we start hearing Mark Walter isn't that impressed with what he has seen from Rob Pelinka. All right, let's open this thing up to your guys' questions and comments. I did see, wow, we have a few super comments, which means I get to play the most important sound on the show. Always. By the way, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications for the show. Turn on notifications for YouTube so you get the notifications for the show. All of that good stuff. To all of you who are new around these parts, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been really fun to watch this thing grow, and you guys have been a key part of that growth. So thank you very much. Regulation left a super but didn't leave a question. So regulation, if you have a question, hit me with it, and I'll try to. Oh, here we go. All right. Regulation, you had mentioned wanting Austin to get a descending contract with the money going down each year. Was that never a realistic option or something the Lakers front office didn't push for? So this is where the reporting on Austin's, like the timing of Austin's contract, has been really interesting, because dating back to last year, I had people close to the Lakers adamant, yeah, like Austin's getting his max. Stop it. He's a future. He would have been an all-star, could have been an all-NBA player had he not gotten hurt, averaging 23 or 24, 5-5 on solid efficiency numbers. Like, all year, I was told that this is not even a question. There's a decent chance that it's already been figured out, right? And then at the time of his signing it, talked to those same people. This feels like it had to have been pretty painless. Was told, yep, it was very painless. This was figured out in short order. However, nationally, from a lot of, I guess, my peers who or people who have been doing this for a long time, who I know are incredibly well plugged in, the narrative coming out of there from those platforms is actually the Lakers lowballed Austin Reeves and then only recently increased their offer when the Detroit Pistons, were threatening to open up space, even though they never actually opened up space until after Austin Reeves was already signed. Regardless, I think this doesn't have to be a mutually exclusive thing. I think there are probably parts of the story that I have been told and that I have kind of accumulated that are correct, and I think there are probably parts of that story that are also true. As usual, I think that the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. One thing I've been thinking about is that the Lakers and Austin's camp all year, maybe we're on the same page as far as what Austin's number was going to be, and that this would get done relatively quickly and painlessly and all of these things. And then when it came time to actually act upon those conversations, it's possible that Rob Pelinka went back on some of those conversations and then lowballed Austin Reeves. And then we had this kind of potentially, if he any negotiation that involves lowballing, like if you think about it, they increased the number from 30 million to 45 million average over the course of the contract or whatever. That's a 50% increase that, just for some reason came out of nowhere. So like the reason I bring all this up, and one day I'll find out the truth. I usually find out the truth when you're in Vegas and people have a couple of drinks and everything is off the record. And everything is like there's no texting, there's no talking on the phone, there's no recording or anything like that. And it's all this hush hush, like this stays here, but it never tends to stay there type of conversations. Maybe then I will hear what actually happened. And then after that, I can have the full story at my disposal. But for right now, all I can work off of is what I heard. And so as far as like, if you choose to believe that Austin and the Lakers did this as painlessly as possible, then the descending offer was never a possibility, because the Lakers, under that circumstance, would have known right from the get-go that there was going to be enough demand for Austin that they were going to have to just max him out And the compromise would be a 4-year deal instead of a 5-year deal, with a player option as the fourth. If you choose to believe the stories that are being reported, by ESPN, by the Athletic, blah, blah, blah. If you are choosing to believe those stories, then there really was no wiggle room here, right? If the Lakers were so desperate that they all of a sudden negotiated out of, or were negotiated into a 50% increase in that average annual salary, then they didn't have the leverage to ask for any kind of construction of that contract. Um so like, and one thing that I did get wrong when I was talking about this in the run up to this is that, like, you can only pay Austin his max, like the max that you could pay him in that first year, and either it can go up or it can stay level or it can go down from there. But you can't offer Austin his, like, the most that you could offer him and then have it descend down to the max that you could have paid him this year. That's not how that works. It would have had to start at his max and then descend from there, which means that Austin would have been getting a pay cut, which is something that obviously did not happen. So as far as, like, what I would prefer there, like, it sounds as if the Lakers just didn't have enough leverage, whether that was at the beginning of at the onset of the offseason or right before they finally agreed to a deal. Um, the Lakers didn't have the leverage here to set any kind of terms, which is a bit of a bummer because, look, I'm really happy for Austin, but this does put a lot of pressure on the front office to get every other move correct. Bubba and the old man, right? Any Lakers center buzz, or are we doomed? So right now, I would say that the most buzz that is out there is probably for Mitchell Robinson. That is like the name that is most closely attached to the Lakers right now. Now, I will grant that usually if there's a name that is attached to the Lakers, it doesn't get out until right before it actually happens. I believe I look, like, but they can't sign or agree to anything with Mitchell Robinson for like another several days or whatever. So I think they have that as an option in their back pocket, and I think the Knicks know that the Lakers have in that is a option for themselves in their back pocket. But I believe that the Lakers are working on something a lot more impactful than Mitchell Robinson, who was fine. Like, I think he's a fine player and all that stuff, but there's always the injury concerns with him. I'd have to look at his career numbers, but I can't imagine he's averaged much more than, if ever, he's averaged 20 minutes a game in a season, that he played very many games in. So he would be like a fine addition, but he's not an A-list center, and the Lakers know, and Rob Pelinka knows that he has to go out and get an A-list center if he wants to keep his job. So we'll see what comes of all of this. But yeah, Mitchell Robinson is probably the buzziest name out there right now, even if it isn't the most exciting name. And hopefully he gets better. But unfortunately, it looks like the Kessler thing is just, it just doesn't seem like it's happening. In order to make a real offer on Kessler, the Lakers would have to come to terms with LeBron, probably renounce Rui, and then use every penny of the room that they have left over from those options to offer to Kessler. And then you have that much money just kind of sitting there for a while the rest of the offseason takes place around you. Either that or they would have to overpay in a sign and trade, which I don't believe they want to do either. So yeah, the center market is just tough. And that's why I've been kind of annoyed when I see these other options leave the board, not just because I think they are all better options than DeAndre Ayton, but also because every single time one of those names leaves the board, that gives these other teams that the Lakers would have to work with to land their center that much more leverage. And given that the Lakers are limited in assets and limited in options, not having leverage here is kind of a fatal blow. Let's see. The next question here came from Jay Cooper, 9795. Claxton is bad. Why don't you talk to Brooklyn fans? They will tell you. Night to night, he is one of the dumbest basketball players ever. Low IQ player. I am not saying he is perfect. There's a reason he was salary dumped, right? And there's a reason that Chicago Bulls fans are like, part of the thing that, like, if I was a Bulls fan, I'd be kind of frustrated over is that, like, if you take Claxton into your cap space, you'd better have the roster or creativity there who is going to make him a lot better. And I don't know, depending on how you feel about Josh Giddey, I just don't think that player is there in Chicago right now. Whereas had the Lakers acquired Nick Claxton, I would have been very confident that the Lakers would have gotten more from him than just about any other team in the league would have gotten from him had he arrived there. Luka is elite at creating lob opportunities. Austin is very good at creating lob and pick and roll opportunities. LeBron is very, very good at creating those opportunities. And I believe all three of those guys are going to be back next year. So had Claxton gotten there, I think you would have gotten the best version of Claxton. And I think the best version of Claxton is better than the version of DeAndre Ayton that you got last year, let alone the version of DeAndre Ayton who you'll probably get if you recommit to him, right? I don't think that he's going to like work any harder to keep his career alive next year than he did last year. Now maybe you benefit from some continuity there. He learns a little bit more how to play with Luka. Maybe he matures a little bit more, and Luke and Ayton is a better player than he was last year. But I just, I just don't like, without change, progress is impossible. And if you run it back with Ayton next year, I just think you're signaling to Luka, sorry, man, we're not good enough to build a roster around you that you specifically asked for this position, and the Lakers weren't able to get it done. I don't think that would end well. Next question here comes from Matthew the Sicilian. Thank you very much, Matthew. Hey, Anthony, I know you're going off the info you have now and just doing your job. I want to see the final roster. We may look back and realize the moves for Claxton / Stewart would have prevented moves in free agency. We'll see. Totally fair. Like 100% fair that, like, I was having this conversation last night with somebody who I asked, like, do you think the job that Rob Pelinka has done so far would be enough for Mark Walter to feel confident in Rob Pelinka moving forward? And the response, which I think was very, very fair, altogether fair, objectively fair even, is we aren't even at free agency yet. We need to see what this roster looks like on July 14th, let alone October, whatever opening night is going to be, 17th or whatever it is. Like, this roster is incomplete right now. We don't know what this is going to look like. Now, if you say, well, at the very least, he didn't lose Austin Reeves, and because things are looking like LeBron is probably going to be back at what I think is probably a pretty reasonable number. I keep on hearing 2 years, $50-ish million a year. That, like, maybe, just maybe, we'll look back on this offseason and say, all right, good job, Rob. But to me, this offseason is going to be defined by the center spot. And if the Lakers don't walk away from a center after Luka Doncic and his camp specifically asked for it and specifically reminded everybody that this was the summer that they had been told to wait for, then it's real bad. So and it might just be like you're saying that, trading for Claxton or trading for Stewart so early in the offseason would have cost the Lakers other opportunities down the line. But the opposite is also true, where we might arrive at the options that the Lakers have to settle on later in the summer and look back and say, damn it, Lakers probably should have been more proactive there and gone with one of the better options earlier on. Who knows? We cannot say. I would also remind everybody, just really quickly before I go into more of your guys' questions and comments, I would also remind everybody that a big part of all of this optionality that we kept hearing about for years, as the Lakers wasted LeBron's prime and wasted the first year and a half of Luka Doncic in a Laker uniform, um, is like part of that optionality was, well, you never know what superstars could potentially be available. Maybe it's Giannis. Maybe it's so and so. Maybe it's this other superstar. Well, we've now seen two superstars move, and the Lakers haven't even facilitated either of those moves right now. Like, that's not a great look, given that this was what we, and way more importantly, Luka Doncic was promised. That's a big factor here, was that Luka and his camp had to remind everybody at the onset of the summer, hey, remember, you guys said this was the year, right? That wasn't like Dave McMenamin writing it in his article as a reminder. That wasn't Dan Wojcicki or Brian Windhorst saying it on a podcast. That wasn't me saying it on a podcast for the umpteenth time. That was Dave McMenamin of ESPN getting a quote from somebody from Luka's camp reminding the Lakers, yo, you said this was the year. And that's a huge detail that I don't think can possibly be exaggerated greatly enough. Anthony Rodriguez writes, if the Lakers were to sign and trade LeBron for Jared Allen, but the Cavs wanted a first, would you still do it? Absolutely not. No. Like, I'm giving them LeBron James. Like, even more so, I'm giving them LeBron James on a discount. So I don't think that makes a whole bunch of, if it is Jared Allen, it would be kind of a straight up deal. I also I've wondered if LeBron was that adamant about going back to Cleveland, if the Lakers would accept like Max Strus and some stuff for LeBron there, in that sign and trade, which would be kind of interesting. But yeah, if it's just Jared Allen, who, like we talked about Nick Claxton being sleight of frame, Jared Allen also very skinny, also gets moved very easily. Not a perfect center. Great lob threat, runs the floor really well, would objectively make the Lakers better. I don't know that he is necessarily a straight up upgrade from LeBron James. But yeah, I would not give up additional draft capital to get Jared Allen. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. We have some more here I saw. Which, by the way, thank you to those of you who are taking time out of your day. Let's Run UNLV writes, would Jeannie rather fire and humiliate Rob or trade Luka? Seems like Jeannie would have her control for the next bit guaranteed in writing, right? It is in writing. From what I've heard, that Jeannie running the show from a day-to-day operation standpoint is in writing. However, Mark Walter does have veto power and final say power, and would have the power to fire Rob Pelinka. So now in terms of what Jeannie would prefer, I don't think there's a world where Jeannie Buss, wow, Ecuador upset Germany. Holy cow. Look at those scenes. That's awesome. That is so cool. Incredible. Anyway, sorry. but yeah, yeah, I've never thought that there's a world where Genie Bus would like willingly fire Rob Pelinka. Now what I will say is that as part of the purchase, remember Rob Pelinka as well as other key factors of the organization, they all got, those big bonuses, that I would imagine would operate as a golden parachute, right? We've seen Tim Harris get fired by Mark Walter. He was a huge Genie Bus ally. So like we've seen it happen. And I think that if Mark Walter got any sense whatsoever that Luca was getting frustrated enough to start looking at greener pastures elsewhere, I I would imagine he would have a tough conversation with Genie and say, "Do you want to do it or do I? Do you want me to? Or do we want to just ask him to quit? Step down, retire, however you want to frame it. But I want to start getting my people in there so that we don't waste this opportunity that we have with Luka Doncic. And with this entity that I invested $10 billion into, right? Or the equivalent of $10 billion. So like there's gonna have to be some serious transformation taking place in terms of process, in terms of roster, in terms of decision making, in terms of so many things that need to get a lot better. I think for Mark Walter to feel like things are going great, and that needs to start happening yesterday. But as far as like what she would rather do, I think she would probably rather trade Luca. I just don't like. There's no world where Mark Walter gives the okay on trading Luca before the Lakers fire Pelinka. That is so crazy. Ecuador beating Germany. That is awesome. Let's see. The next question that we have here. Matthew the Sicilian, need your opinion on Austin's pitch with his favorite songs and pillows with his name on it. I don't know, man. I immediately thought of the Aldridge pitch. Dude, me too. Oh my God, so same. Like I thought about that immediately. It was like, oh, from the from the company that brought you who was the guy? Who is the singer from Maroon 5? I forget that guy's name, but he's there in like the Aldridge jersey that actually caught the Lakers a tampering fine, and then the meeting was such a disaster that they actually asked for another meeting with LaMarcus that focused more on basketball. And then eventually he just signed elsewhere anyway. Yeah, this like the whole like country music and all that. And that like just really quickly, I know that I can sometimes get kind of navel gazily about the reporting that I do, but I just find it really hard to believe that the Lakers would do all that, right? Here's your favorite songs, here's some pillows with your name on it, here's this, here's that, and here's an offensive number. Here's $30 million a year. I just find that really hard to now. Maybe they waited to do all of that until they finally offered him the max as like the olive branch to make everybody feel better. But if you are to believe, I don't know, like there are just aspects of the story that aren't quite adding up to me. But what I will say is that I did reach out to some people and I have heard confirmation that those pillows are real. And I am looking forward to seeing pictures of those pillows when I get there to Vegas and those aforementioned meetings that I talked about start taking place, which apparently might feature Cuffs the Legend. What a weirdo. Let's see. Let's run UNLV. If Rob fails 2026, it's not like they're suddenly going to have more assets. Braun is leaving at some point soon. So that's a huge asset gone for nothing. Yeah, it is. Darius made this point, I think, better than I've heard it made anywhere the other day on the LFR pod, where he said that like usually when when you lose a player of that ilk or a player taking up that much salary, right? Which, like, let's say best case scenario, it is the $50 million a year that we're talking about. I actually think it makes sense for the Lakers to have that descend to where it starts at 27 and then goes down to 23. Depending on, like, if they're an above the cap team, then like those few extra million, but and then you become that much more flexible as far as like losing that cap hold after the second year. Um, but like yeah, like, losing LeBron, not just the talent, but also, a player making that amount of money, and then that money just kind of falling off of your books with a team that at that point would be above the the soft cap, and at that point you just really difficult to try to replace him because you can't trade him, you can't sign and trade him. He's just gone. That it's over at that point. And that was, part of the argument that has been made to this point as to why it makes sense to just let LeBron walk while like him leaving the team gives you more flexibility to replace him. The problem is, as we've talked about here, the Lakers, for whatever reason, didn't foresee that the free agent market would be as bad as it is, and that LeBron, even heading into his year 42, 43 season, whatever it is, would still be better than the vast majority of the free agents who you would get or you would sign to replace him. Um, and that obviously really complicated everything. So, uh, yeah, I think, what we might see is you know maybe a big balloon payment now and like a partial guarantee for the second year if he does decide to play beyond this second year to make that decision to retire maybe that much easier. Maybe it's only a 1 year deal, but from the number that I hear most frequently is 2 years, $50 million, and the structure of the contract beyond that is still kind of up in the air. All right, let's go here. Matthew the Sicilian. If you had to choose Turner and Kuzma or Robinson and Time Lord. Well, according to Kuzma, he can guard 1 through 5. So, I mean, my choice is made. No, I would probably go Robinson and Time Lord just so that their injury concerns kind of offset each other. You kind of do it the Dodger way where like you have enough starting pitching to where if one guy goes down, two guys go down, three guys go down, that you have enough depth to kind of make up for it. I wouldn't love it because there's so much overlap between Robinson and Time Lord. Those guys can't play together. Those guys can't play with Jackson either, which I wouldn't love. So I would like if I could like maybe switch that to like Robinson and Mamu. So you bring in a guy who can space the floor. That would be something I'd be really interested in. Um, that's why. Oh, I guess I didn't talk about the whole second round thing. You know, basically, I have a TikTok out there for it if you want more details. But long story short, the Lakers were interested in that Henry Vassar, whose name I said incorrectly on that TikTok, which went viral and lost contain. Whoops. But Vassar apparently was told that the Lakers would, he would never fall any further than them. Unfortunately, the pick that the Lakers bought was like 56 or 57 or whatever it was. And seeing as he was first round talent, the Atlanta Hawks were like, we don't care about that promise. You want playing time? We can give you playing time. We're going to take you. And if you choose to not sign whatever contract with us, then you can sign whatever contract you want to with us. But we're going to take you. And at the 54th pick or whatever it was that they took him with, that's enough of a gamble for somebody who was mocked in the late first in a good draft, too, by the way. So I think the hope there with the Lakers was that they would have him be the floor spacing big and Jackson would be your backup and you would go out and sign a starting center after DeAndre Ayton either opts out or you trade him. And that's how you would go into next season. But it didn't work out that way. Obviously, the Hawks just said, "We're taking you," which apparently doesn't have like it's not infrequent that that happens where some team hears that whatever agreement is in place and they say, "We don't care." It's just like Utah um, last year when they took Ace Bailey. It was like, "We don't care. We're taking the best player." And this year, when Darren Peterson, like, they had to go out and meet with him rather than have Darren Peterson go and take a meeting with them. They were like, "We don't care. We're taking the second best player." Like, teams will do this all the time with a lot riskier decisions than the 54th pick in a draft. And that's how this played out. But I would alter that slightly, and I would say Robinson and Mamu for my backup spots. But either way, there, I don't think that would be enough to make uh Luca thrilled about going into next season with the center that he thinks is good enough. Let's see. The next question comes from Siskel 2831. Until we have a championship group, our success slash goal should be at the end of the season, keeping one diamond in the rough piece like Goodwin, Huff, or Caruso. See, but like those are the guys, right? That I talked about earlier. Like the Lakers have been borderline weird about their disinterest in committing to players like Goodwin or Huff or Caruso or Timmy last year, or Scottie Pippen Jr. in years past as well, right? We got another Exhibit 10, Robert McRae. But so like yeah, like the this whole thing where the Lakers, for the sake of the optionality that they haven't been able to put to use this summer, they have said goodbye to a lot of those guys, and it's just a real kick in the nuts, right? And so yeah, to your point, I think that like the goal, whether they win a championship or not, it's learning from this and pivoting from this cap space centric approach that to this point has yielded pretty pedestrian returns. Granting, as I said earlier, that I might sit here and eat a whole bunch of crow, which I hope to be able to do. The next question here comes from B Green 112, who writes, Rob gets a lot of flack for a guy that got LeBron, got prime AD, got prime Luca for nothing, found Austin Reeves and won a championship. Most teams would be thrilled. That's what's so wild about this dude. The way that I've kind of talked about this with people in the past is that like there are several ways that you could arrive at a C grade, right? You could just get straight C's, and just be kind of this steady, boring milk toast GM who never wins anything, but also never does anything that like makes you want to throw him off a bridge. Um, there are executives who will make like B level moves and D level moves where from time to time they'll make a really good trade or a series of a couple of good great trades, but then they'll also make some really bad ones or some bad ones that really kind of hurt you when you arrive at that C grade. And then I think Rob is the extreme version of this, where he is capable of these like moments of brilliance, but he is also capable of some of the absolute dumbest things that any currently employed executive has done. And all of those things rate out to about a C or so. And can you win consistently or sustainably with a C-level executive? I don't know, maybe. Uh, I would like for the Lakers at some point in my life to go out and hire somebody whose, floor is C and their ceiling is A, like a Presti or, guys like that. But as it stands right now, the Lakers have to hope that Rob pulls off enough A's so that he grades out at better this offseason than a C. And we'll see if he's able to do that. But you're right. Like Rob has done. Now, I won't give him any credit, frankly, for LeBron. That was clearly LeBron making a decision independent of any of the, like, what Rob was selling. I will give Rob credit for Anthony Davis because the relationship between the Lakers and the Pelicans when Rob took over was in such dire straits that it like required not just Magic stepping down, but the Pelicans fired Dell Demps and they hired David Griffin, and Griffin and Rob were able to kind of resuscitate those trade talks and finally like get something done that was productive for both sides, at least at the time. The Luka thing is, I think Rob deserves a whole bunch of credit for keeping that quiet to the extent that he did. And it eventually cost Luka or Nico and Jason Kidd their jobs. But because the Lakers had kicked the can for so long, at the tail end of the AD LeBron era, they weren't ready at all to have Luka here, and now they're kind of stuck in the spot where they're trying to compete with Luka expectations, while having post LeBron assets, which is just really kind of tricky. And we'll see to what extent Rob is able to figure this out. He's obviously running out of time a little bit though. Matthew the Sicilian writes, Rob also blew up a championship team, running it back, without running it back and traded for Russ. So yeah, major credit for getting, yeah. So like, in addition to the stuff that I talked, like the summer of Russ is honestly, though probably pretty easily the worst summer from a decision-making standpoint any executive has ever had with the Lakers. Like you could even try to say that like the Luol Deng Timothy Mozgov summer was worse, which I might be willing to listen to, but they didn't like lose in Alex Caruso that summer. And when they signed Mozgov and Deng, they weren't very close to winning a championship anyway. So it didn't really like ruin anything. Russell Westbrook slammed the championship window shut on LeBron and Anthony Davis. And picking Talen Horton-Tucker over Alex Caruso, Talen Horton-Tucker, who is no longer in the league, when, by the way, they didn't have to choose either of those two guys over one another. They picked, not only did they force themselves into a decision that they didn't have to make, but they also then made the absolute wrong decision. And ever since then, you've seen Kentavious Caldwell-Pope win at least one championship. One, I think, right? You've seen Alex Caruso win two championships, and very easily could have won one last year. So yeah, I just, like I said, there's different ways to arrive at a C. The irony here is that I'm really kind of sick of Rob Pelinka being like the AF version of the C when that was kind of sort of the kind of student I was. Sorry, mom and dad. All right. I am going to go ahead and hop on out of here and get ready for whatever news might be and hopefully is coming our way. If we get any kind of late breaking stuff, I will hop back on here. But for right now, the plan is just to enjoy the Team USA game, which kicks off here in 3 hours and some change. So until the next time you guys hear from me, which who knows when that might be, the safest bet is to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for whenever we're getting ready to go live. But for the next until the next time you guys hear from us, I'm Anthony Irwin saying have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, subscribe to the pod. Follow me on TikTok. Lakers Lounge, I think, is where it is over there. Follow me on Anthony Irwin LA on Twitter, as well as finding me on the Offside app. And I will talk to you guys whenever it is that I talk to you guys.
Bye, everyone.